He's Howard Ibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 28 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. Henry, we have a guest all the way from Singapore, and he's going to tell us his story. It's a fascinating conversation. Let's join the conversation now. All right, Henry, we're back with another episode. We're joined today by the founder and creative director of an independent shop in Singapore, the other side of the world. His name is Vasanth Seshadri, and he has an interesting story to tell us, and we are really excited about having him join us. So, Vasanth, thank you for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers.
And thank you for having me. Yeah, good to be here, Howard and Henry. Good to talk to both of you.
One of the things that Henry and I love to talk about are creative briefs, and that's really what got us together. We could riff on that topic for hours, and we have in the past. But one of the things that fascinates me, and I think probably Henry too, about speaking with you on the other side of the world, is to get an understanding of how you approach solving problems, creative problems, for the clients that you work for. And in the process, understanding how the brief and the briefing process works in your environment. Now, you have a virtual shop, so you work fast and furious, I'm going to guess. So you have much more control over how things work. Why don't you share with us, how you got your start in the business and how that evolved into where you are today, and then we can talk about some of these details.
Yeah, a lot of people are surprised to know that I did not actually study anything related to advertising, and I actually studied computer engineering in Singapore, which is where I'm from. And I did work for 1.5 years as a software engineer, but I felt I wasn't one of those who are passionate about it. I mean, there are people who wake up thinking of code and dreaming in code, and they can code for 12 hours and go to sleep thinking of it, but I'm not one of them. So I started getting restless while I was a software engineer. And it so happened that was 2009 when digital marketing was just emerging. And there was a need for people in the advertising industry who had knowledge of software and knowledge of digital technologies. So based on that, I was able to get some freelance gigs as, say, project manager of digital projects at agencies. And soon I was able to get the feel of the industry enough to have the confidence to start looking for full-time jobs in it. And that's when Wunderman came along. It was still Wunderman. It was not Wunderman Thompson. It was not VML like it is now. And they took a chance on me and asked me to be a copywriter. And though I had not gone to ad school or any of those, I kind of learned on the job. And after a couple of years there, I felt I liked it enough to continue doing it. And so after 2 years there in 2011, I had a great opportunity to go to BBDO New York on the other side of the world. And it's one of the best agencies and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cities in terms of an advertising industry. And so that was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So 2011 to 2013, I was in BBDO New York, which was a great education. That probably compensated for not going to ad school, because when you're surrounded by some amazing talent and you learn not only from the leaders of the agency, but also people surrounding you and even people junior to you, you learn from everyone there. So that was a great education. And in 2014, I came back to...
Before you move away, because that's you're right, that's an amazing agency. It's a great opportunity. What would you say would be one or two of the most important lessons that you learned or takeaways from that experience at BBDO?
I think the biggest learning from a creative standpoint was don't settle for the obvious option. Whether it's in ideas, or whether it's a line of copy, or whether it's in a visual expression, like the very first set of ideas or lines or visuals that occur to you will not be your best. So keep going. So keep going and pushing beyond the obvious. And that was ingrained in like everyone, like in BBDO New York. And another thing I kind of learned was always be in touch with what the rest of the industry is doing. Like I was surrounded by people who spend every day on creativity online to see what's the latest stuff coming along and coming out. And it's like if we didn't keep ourselves up to date, we will not be able to be part of conversations with the rest of the team. So that kind of disciplined us to keep up to date. And that's another great learning.
All right, I'd like to interrupt real quick and react to a couple of things you've said. The first being that you had like no background in advertising at all. This is a recurring theme here on the Brief Brothers with a lot of our guests, including yours truly here and Howard too. We both started out down other career paths and kind of found our way into advertising. So I think there's something to be said about that. And we've talked quite a bit about that. But you also said something just now, which I very much resonated with me, which is the thing about your first idea usually isn't going to be your best idea. And I give a canned speech that I have, for students and things like that. And that's one of the points that I emphasize is, and I liken it to stand-up comedy, of which I'm a big fan. I follow a lot of stand-up comedians. I'm very much into, I love the art form, but I'm also fascinated by like the process of writing comedy and stuff. And I heard one comedian, and I would give him credit if I remembered who it was, but he was talking about the writing process. It's like something happens in current events, and you come up with a joke, and it's the joke that everybody else is going to have. And then you sit down and you think about it a little more, and you get like a second joke that could be a little bit more deeper. But by the time you get to the third joke about the same subject matter that you've been thinking about it a while, it's something that's your unique perspective on that subject matter that's going to be a different joke than everybody else's, and it's going to be a qualitatively better joke. So I liken that same thing with advertising ideas. I think the first thing is usually the very obvious thing, and you have to, it's really challenge yourself to dig deeper to find those kind of lateral angles, and over time you develop, like a stand-up comedian, your own style, your own way of viewing things.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's the case with every creative field. And I think, but there's also another side of it, which is once you push yourself to the maximum, come up with a wide variety of excellent ideas, you will also come to a stage where you keep pushing further, and then you realize there's nothing else there, and there's really, you've kind of coming up with not so good ideas again. But I think that is good news, because that shows that you have gone through the full process. And what you have is probably the best that anybody can have in the brief.
Point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So BBDO, where did you go after BBDO?
I came back to Singapore and I joined JWT. And once again, it was JWT at the time. It was not Wunderman Thompson yet. So I worked for both of those before they merged. So JWT, I just spent a few months there. It was a contract role, but that was also a great learning experience. And what I learned at JWT was different from BBDO in the sense that in JWT, or maybe it's to do with Singapore or Asia in general, in terms of advertising, that people I met at JWT were a lot more wild and wacky and random with their ideas. At a place like BBDO, I felt like we go through the process of, like, say, doing enough research into a topic, and then ideating, coming up with a lot of ideas, and then evaluating them, executing them, the proper process, which I believe is a good thing. But at JWT, I felt that there's another way of doing it, which is to just be completely random. And I think there isn't really one correct way to be creative. And I think this shows that.
Do you think that was a product of just the local office or the corporate culture overall at JWT? Or because JWT was one of the agencies that founded strategic, account planning. And so I got to believe that maybe that was just happened to be the characteristics of that specific office.
Yes, I think
Well,
so.
I just want to add, I want to add to that a little bit, because my thought was there a wider variety of cultural influences at the JWT office in Singapore than there was at BBDO in New York? I mean, they're both pretty diverse cities, but I'm just curious.
Not really, because in New York we had Asians, South Americans, Europeans, North Americans.
Yeah,
we had a variety of people, and in Singapore we also had a variety of people. So I don't think it's because of that. I think it's because of the specific characteristics of that local office, and maybe the specific characteristic of the advertising scene of that city. Because I think maybe in general, I think there are quite a few agencies in Singapore where the culture is to be a bit more random in coming up with ideas. I think it also could be because there are like many more art directors here coming from like other Southeast Asian countries. Like Thai art directors are very good, Indonesian art directors, like Malaysian, Filipino art directors. And I think when the culture is more driven by art directors, it's more likely, I think, to see a very cool visual or come up with a very cool graphic and then kind of reverse engineer the idea.
Start with a picture first instead of the words first, which I think was probably more of a process oriented approach, whereas the visual side is virtually limitless, right?
Yeah. I think in New York it's probably a little bit more copywriter driven, and copywriters are almost like dabble into strategy a little bit. I think it's because I started as a copywriter, I know like how we think, and we kind of start with the insight about the nature of the person you're talking to, which is almost like the job of a planner, and then that kind of informs the lines of copy. So I think when a culture is more copywriter driven, we kind of follow the traditional process of starting with the insight and then leading it onto the idea, which then leads to the execution. But maybe when it's more art director driven, maybe we kind of start with the picture, start with the execution a bit more. I think that could be the difference.
Who would you say would be your biggest influencers in terms of other creative leaders in the industry?
I would say somebody like Anselmo Ramos, because I think wherever he has gone, the agency he's at has instantly become one of the best in the world.
Anselmo, if you're listening, be a guest on the Brief Brothers.
Yeah, we've been trying to get him on the show. So if you have an inside.
I cornered him in his office one day here in Miami. I was working out of a WeWork here in Coral Gables, and that's where they were running their shop from. And I cornered him, but I haven't been able to get him on the show yet.
We're working on it.
It can take time, but generally they tend to crack sooner or later.
Yeah. Henry can be persuasive. Anyone else that you would say that you particularly admired or tried to emulate?
Well, let me see. I think a little bit earlier than like Anselmo Ramos, but having some similarities would have been like David Droga, because again, wherever he went, instantly became one of the best agencies in the world. Saatchi & Saatchi Singapore, when he was here, it was one of the best agencies, and then Droga 5, same thing. Before that, he was in between that, he was in London, and I don't remember where he worked, but that was also one of the best agencies in the world for the few years that he was there. And I think it's a little
That
bit cliche to say David Droga, but I think he is one of the
definitely a couple of heavyweights there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you got inside scoops on David, we'd like to get him too.
Maybe one more person I would like to mention is Greg Hahn, because he was at BBDO at the same time as me, and the when you observe the way he works, it's like kind of it's very fun and very, I mean, mischievous, which is why his agency is called Mischief. And
Yes.
and I think, yeah, he was one of those who influenced me as well. But I wouldn't say I very overtly tried to emulate any one person. I think can borrow things from people, but kind of put your own stamp to it. I think that's
Right.
sweet to it.
So when you were finished up with JWT, what was your next step?
I joined Edelman, the PR agency, and that was a little bit of an unexpected move to go to Edelman, which had not built a creative team just yet. But I was one of the first creatives in the Edelman Singapore office, and we had a small creative team. It was just 6 of us, and that was the time when Edelman was trying to cultivate the creative capability, and we were at the tip of the spear in trying to do that. And it's always a challenge when you go from agencies where everyone understands that creativity is the tip of the spear to an agency that's still kind of finding its feet as far as creativity is concerned, and you still have like legacy PR people who are not sure if a creative team is really that important. And
Were they trying to delve into advertising, or are they just trying to add creativity to their public relations activities, like their events, their activations, and so forth?
when we were there, we were definitely doing things that were beyond traditional PR. We were like producing a lot of videos, for example, not TVCs, because I think the clients we had were very entrenched with their agencies of record for TVCs, but a lot of online videos we did, and a lot of like sometimes they would come to us for a website revamp or app revamp or a social experiment, because social experiments were quite big for a few years. Like I was at Edelman from 2014 to 17, and 2012 was when the Dove sketches happened, where Edelman in New York was the PR partner. But the fact that Edelman was part of that, kind of, though Ogilvy and Anselmo Ramos in particular were the stars of the show, a little bit of that light shown on Edelman as well, and they used to like come to us for social experiments, and we were doing quite a few of those. So it was beyond traditional PR, and over time, the whole agency kind of understood the importance of it. And now, many years after I have left, after all 6 of us have left, now I find Edelman's name more common in award shows and as the lead agency, not as the secondary partner to an Ogilvy or somebody, but as the lead agency. So I would like to think it's the efforts we put in from 2014 to 17 that have borne fruit now. And not only us, but similar people who were at various other Edelman offices around the world, the first few creatives there.
Well, it's interesting because the first agency I started at was a little creative boutique here in Miami called Creatability, and we were like jacks of all trade. We did PR, we did advertising, and where the two kind of met, we had something the founder called 3D PR, which was like we'd find like different ways to communicate. Like they had, I think Universal Studios was opening the Flintstones ride, so we did like the press release on like a stone tablet, but it was styrofoam, was like a movie prop, but the press release was like on this Flintstone stone tablet. For Powerade, they were releasing a new flavor, and we had these lockers, these mini lockers with a bottle inside, the press release inside. And what that did was it taught me, you know, the importance of earned media as a multiplier. Like the idea is the idea, but there's always a way to execute it in which you can get a little more earned media out of it. And I think that that's important. We talk a lot about being in a silo, and only knowing like that, you know, I didn't start out as a strategist. I started out working all different types of positions in the agency. And like I said, it was an agency that dabbled in media, dabbled in public relations. It was a creative agency. So you got to see the whole kind of business. And I think that that's really good for people,
Hmm.
because it gives you a broader perspective.
Yep, at Edelman, I definitely found that I was able to understand like the wider scope of a business beyond the creative team. For example, because the creative team is a relatively new thing there, whenever a PR team needed uh, to offer a creative set of services to the client, there was a discussion about the money involved, and we had to like, I mean, we as in the six creatives, we had to often spend time like putting together estimates of how many hours each person would need, and kind of like negotiating with the PR teams on the cost side of things. So for the first time, I was involved in like cost discussions, and that was a good thing, because I mean, especially for somebody who would later go on and start his own agency, that turned out to be like very valuable experience. Yeah.
Was that next, or did you have another shop before you started Sunnyside?
Between Edelman and Sunnyside, I spent a few months like freelancing in a few different agencies, because that's when I was getting ready to start it. But I was still kind of getting certain things sorted out in terms of like who I should work with and who the leads I pursue should be. While I was figuring out those things, I freelanced at Sapient Razorfish. I'm not sure what they call it now. I think it's called Publicis Sapient. At
Yeah.
the time, Sapient
Mm.
Razorfish. I freelanced at Saatchi for a bit, and Hakuhodo. So that was like 2017. Most of the second half of 2017 was that, and then early 2018 was when I started the Sunny Side, and that was a leap of faith. I felt after about 9 years, yeah, between 2009 to 2018, after 9 years, I felt I probably knew enough about the industry, and I also knew like enough potential partners in terms of like other creatives and strategists, and also enough client relationships to take that plunge. And in 2018 and 19, we did a lot better than I expected. I was actually expecting a struggle in the first couple of years, but uh, some of the people I'd worked with in my previous agencies kind of took a chance on us, and we did some uh, pretty cool work for them, especially P&G, Procter and Gamble. They gave us two big projects. One was for Vietnam, and it was actually a TV commercial, because Vietnam is still a traditional TV oriented market. Actually, even the second one was a TVC, come to think of it. It was for Gillette, and that was for Singapore. So in 2018 and 2019, we did two sizable campaigns for P&G. That gave us a great start. 2020 and 21 were quiet years, because it was a quiet year. Those were quiet years for everyone. So
Right.
that was a period when I even considered like shutting it down and looking for a job again, but the job market wasn't great either.
No.
And yeah, but 2022 onwards, it became better again. Like we started, because clients started believing that the new normal is not going to be that new. And I think it's actually the new normal now. It's kind
It's
of
the
looking
old normal.
it's like the
Yeah.
old normal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's when
I said
2022.
that I said that back then, and my wife laughed at me. And I'm like, every day I'm like, you know, it's like you see, like you go to the airport and one person in 300 is wearing a mask.
Yeah. And that person is probably somebody who has the flu at the moment and doesn't want to pass it on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find that as well. Like I find hardly
Or
anyone who has masks
yeah,
as well.
you know, starting your own shop, I think a lot of creatives have in the back of their mind, if they haven't done it yet, they have it in the back of their minds that that is an ambition of theirs. They want to be out on their own. I have done iterations of that. I've been just a straight up freelancer, where I just had a day rate, and then I've had LLCs. I don't know what the equivalent is in Singapore. Limited liability corporation here. It's not too much different than from a sole proprietorship. So when you were in that, I'm thinking about this and I'm ready to, I'm going to take the plunge, not tomorrow, not next week, but maybe in a month. What was that like? What was that like for you? Did you run into or meet other people who had done in New York what you wanted to do in Singapore? And did you learn anything from what they had done here in the States? What was your model? How did you go about putting this all together?
It was a little scary in terms of like where am I going to find business from? Because I mean, I was just a creative for 9 years. And when you're a creative at a bigger agency, or like somebody else will take care of the business development, they'll bring in the clients and we just have to do the work. And suddenly I was also responsible for bringing in the clients, and it's like the buck stopped with me and there's nowhere else to pass the buck to. And thankfully I had enough like credibility in terms of people I had worked with in the past and done work for. And so that has helped me get clients. And over the years, now that as an agency, we have a kind of a portfolio, a book of like work, even people who don't know me or don't know like what I've done in the past still have started looking at the work we've done and started coming to us, especially if because the work is in specific industries like FMCG, healthcare, like food and so on. So there are others in those spaces who are more willing to work with us given the work we've done in that space. And to what you asked about whether others in places like New York have done what I've done, there are actually quite a few, not only in New York, but in like other parts of like North America or even other parts of Asia who have like collectives, which is slightly different from what I do. I mean, we're not a collective. We are an agency, but there are collectives with like 200 people and so on. Like I have a friend in Toronto who has something called the Bright Birch Collective. So he's got like 200 plus people there, and I'm actually part of that collective. Like, I mean, a lot of small agencies like us, like Sunnyside, are part of that collective, and we have received clients through the Bright Birch Collective, and we have also tried to bring our client contacts to the Bright Birch Collective. And then I have another friend in Singapore who has a similar, who has started a similar collective recently, and I'm part of that as well. So there are quite a few of these emerging. And I think instead of small outfits and collectives competing with one another, I think it's good if we collaborate with one another, because I think there are a lot of like common pain points that have made all these different people start either small agencies or collectives. And I think it comes from the same place of wanting a better way to do great work without the bureaucracy of big agencies. And I think we gain a lot by collaborating. And I think if we don't collaborate and we just compete, it just benefits the big agencies and kills all of us.
It occurred to me that you said you have this network of people that you can tap into to help do the work. Does that network include strategists? Do you do your own strategy work, and which is going to kind of lead me into asking you about a brief, but I'm just curious how you go about offering that service to your client.
The network does have strategists, but I only tap into them when there's an enormous amount of strategy work needed, or strategy work is needed in a category that I'm not experienced in. But I find that so far, because we are perceived as a creative agency and clients come to us for the creative side of things, the strategy has been just the level of strategy that it takes to inform the creative ideation. And I've been able to do it myself, or the small team I put together for each project. Like, let's say a team may have myself, who's the creator and copywriter, and an art director, a second person, and then a third person who could be an illustrator. Let's say we come together to do it. And let's say if there's a fourth person who's a video editor, like all of us are able to collectively bring in the strategy needed for most of our projects.
Do you get a brief? Do you get a brief from your clients?
In some cases, we do. Like when we were when we are invited to a pitch for a P&G or a Castrol or a Novartis, we get a specific brief. In other cases, I mean, when we deal with, like, when we work with startups and SMEs, startups and SMEs have many other things on their plate, and like marketing is something they're only just wetting their toes on. Like they don't follow the same process that multinationals follow. So when we work with them, the so-called brief could be as simple as a verbal 1 or 2 liner of what they're trying to achieve. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And sometimes we have to work with that. But actually, that's not a bad thing, because sometimes, I mean, if the client cannot explain what they're looking for in like 1 or 2 lines, then they're probably not very clear about it. Like, I think the best briefs are brief, and that's why it's called a brief.
Well, yeah, but I think that's the challenge, isn't it? So how many clients really know what it is that who they are, for one thing, and what it is that they want? That's the challenge. I mean, Henry can speak to this from his own experience, but from my experience, you know, I've worked with plenty of major brands who don't know up from sideways, and it surprises the hell out of you. You know,
Yeah,
I've had chief marketing officers tell me, when I ask the question, what's the one thing you want to say about product X in your lineup? Oh, we don't, and Henry's heard me say this before. We don't have one thing. We have a unique package of features. It's like, no one gives a fuck.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the clients that you're working with are far more sophisticated than the rest of us, or are you able to get what you need when you don't get it the first time?
I think it's not like the clients I talk to are definitely necessarily more sophisticated. I think when we work with like startups and SMEs,
well, because if they are, I'm going to pack up and move out there, because you know.
I don't think they are actually, but I think where I'm coming from is that when I talk to like startup founders, they are usually very single-minded of what their company is, and it's with a very specific idea that they even started the company. If not, they wouldn't. So they have a clear idea of what they're trying to achieve as a company. So it's not necessarily from a marketing standpoint, but you know,
I believe that from Procter and Gamble. Procter and Gamble is buttoned up. They know, they teach the rest of us. You know, anyone who's had a couple of years working at Procter and Gamble has been trained, and when they move on to another company, they share the training. But that's unusual.
But you're gonna find a spectrum of companies and cultures, right? So you have some massive giant bureaucracies that are 100 years old, that are, you know, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Then you have, as we've been talking about, you know, smaller startups, and while they might not have a marketing precision, they do have the purity of purpose. They know what business they're in, and that makes it kind of. But I get back to the stat that you always give, Howard, which is a lot of clients end up using the creative process to figure out what their brand strategy is. So it's kind of like a trial, and it's like going to the shoe store and trying on all the different shoes and seeing which one fits. Of course, that's not a very efficient process for them. It's a costly one. It's one that can cause a lot of wear and tear on a relationship if doesn't fit, doesn't fit, doesn't fit, doesn't fit, to find the shoe that fits. But I imagine if it's a small startup, you know, you try on a couple of shoes and find one that fits and move on. And you didn't hire a McKinsey or somebody, you just did it with your ad agency.
Hmm. I think on the one hand, you have like companies that do a great job of training their marketers like P&G, where working with them is quite easy because you know that they will follow the right process. And then on the other hand, you have startups with a purity of purpose, as you said. I think both of those are okay. And I think where the problem comes in is in the middle, where there are a lot of big bureaucratic companies that are not necessarily marketing savvy. And I don't want to name names, but I worked with like companies that are clearly not startups. They are big, like multinationals, but they don't have the marketing savvy of a P&G or a PepsiCo or a Mondelez. And then it's from those kinds of clients that all kinds of random feedback come in, and it's like, my nephew is in the age group that this company is supposed to talk to, and he says he doesn't like it, or my
Yeah.
Never heard that one before.
Their core competencies usually are somewhere else, like either in engineering or manufacturing or dealing with retailers and wholesalers. They're not marketing oriented, and a lot of these are legacy companies that were really founded before the marketing revolution, right? Like a lot of companies now are oriented around marketing, modern companies, but you know, you have legacy, you know, manufacturers, you know, different types. And that's just not their core competence. They have a marketing department. They might have a big marketing department. They might spend a lot of money on marketing, but it's not their core competency. It's not what their business is organized around.
Yep. And there was like I had such an experience with one of the bigger companies that are not very marketing savvy, and there was all kinds of random client feedback coming, and each round of client feedback often contradicting the last. And suddenly there was one thing they did when they brought in a new marketing person. That person came and cleaned house, and suddenly it was a lot more precise. And it turned out that new marketing person they had brought in was ex-P&G.
Yeah. I was just going to say, well, to me, it sounds like you've been able to put together a great team of people, and actually it's probably a larger network that you get to pick and choose from as the projects manifest themselves. And you've also been able to work successfully with these clients to make Sunnyside a successful agency. What do you think? What are the one or two or three things do you think that you do well?
I think we deliver a big agency kind of quality, but at 1/3 of the cost and maybe 3 times the speed. And I think that appeals to a lot of people, because the people we work with in terms of our partners, the people in our network, the people in the team I put together, we are all people who have spent several years in big agencies and working on like big clients. We know what the best work looks like, and we know what the requirements of the best clients are, but we are not currently in big agencies. We are like either freelancers or running our own like small shops. And when we come together, we know how to deliver the quality that the best clients are used to, but we don't have the bureaucracy and the layers of a big agency. So our
Sounds a little bit like our friends at Ghost.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you saw the episode, but we had 3 friends of ours who we cannot name, who go by the name of Ghost. Their motto or mantra is that they want to make their clients famous, not themselves. But they bring, you know, I don't know how many years of experience, a ton of years of experience.
Really senior guys.
Yeah, and they can do what you just said. And my thinking is, I mean, this isn't anything new or radical, but I think, as you said, Vasanth, that in response to the laborious and bureaucratic mentality and rot of a big agency, people are responding to what you have to offer. These, you called it a collective. Ghost is a, I guess it's not part of a collective, but it's a small group of senior creatives. I think more and more senior creatives, mid-level to senior creatives, are seeing this as an opportunity to land some big clients, do some good work with a hell of a lot less red tape. And because you're doing it in Singapore and our buddies are doing it out here in the States, I'm sure there are many, many others around the globe, and we haven't tapped into that at all.
Yep.
It's, I'm not saying anything new. People out there who know this, but I think it's a phenomenon that I think we need to talk about and we should bring more attention to. And I also, before I forget about it, and please address this, before I forget about this, it seems to me that your background as an engineer probably played an important role for the linear thinking required to do the business side of your business. I think that probably helped you. Do you agree?
Yes, I think so. I mean, let me address some of the things you said one by one, because you said quite a few things. I hope I remember everything. Firstly, I mean, we don't call ourselves a collective. We do call ourselves an agency, in fact, and except that we're not a typical agency, and we don't want to be a typical agency either. But there are many others. I mean, we are not the only ones thinking of doing it in a way that is less bureaucratic and doesn't have the lumbering slowness of a big agency. I mean, I'm not saying this is a very unique vision, but the fact that many of us have this vision shows there is something here, that I'm not smoking anything. And it's also an opportunity to work with other like-minded people, and there are many. Some of us call ourselves agencies, some of us call ourselves collectives, some call ourselves just individual freelancers, but I think we're all coming from the same philosophy. And I agree, I mean, to what you said after that, I agree that being an engineer does give me a linear way of, say, approaching things. Firstly, I mean, business development, as you said, but sometimes even when it comes to creativity, I feel like the ideation has to be illogical. It has to be random. You have to go in all directions. But after that, when it comes down to evaluating the ideas according to the filters of the brief and then executing it in a way that maintains its integrity, I think those are logical. And I think my engineering background helps in those as well.
You know, AI is a big topic in our industry. We've had some guests on that. And I think our guest this week is an educator, a 30-year veteran. His name is Ross Patrick. That episode's going to drop this week. We talked with him a week or two ago. And he teaches a course called AI for Advertising. And a lot of his students are not necessarily in the advertising program, either architecture or other things that are creative. What is your thinking about how AI can help or not help in you servicing and serving your clients?
I find AI useful when it comes to like visual asset generation, because we need to generate assets of a large quantity and also a lot of precision. For example, recently we did this campaign for a Singaporean food brand, a baking supplies company, where we had to like encourage people to get their own baking supplies and bake their own mooncakes for the Mooncake Festival, which is a big festival here. So when we wanted to like put together a lot of assets, a lot of visual like AVs and all that, one huge bottleneck we found was the stock images of Asian people. And I mean, stock images of Asian people has always been a bottleneck. But what is even more complicated is that if you lived in Asia for long enough, you'll know that the Vietnamese look is different from the Chinese look, which is different from the Cambodian look, which is different from the Thai look. And then even within Chinese, there are like there's a distinctly different look between a Singaporean Chinese, a Malaysian Chinese, a Taiwan Chinese, a Hong Kong Chinese, a Chinese from China. And we were having serious difficulty finding stock images of Singaporean Chinese looking people, which is a pretty small population. And so we used Midjourney, and we kept giving Midjourney a lot of prompts to steer it in the direction of what we wanted. And that's the only way we were able to find the stock images of the level of detail and level of precision, the exactness we were looking for.
Did
So I
you
think
find these images, or did they create them for you?
Midjourney created it. We
That's
prompted
what I
Midjourney.
thought.
Yeah, we prompted Midjourney, and we had to prompt it several times before we arrived at what we wanted. But we were able to get it through Midjourney. We were able to get it through AI, and were not able to get it through, I mean, straight from Getty Images or Shutterstock or any of those. So
Or
I think
these
sorry?
Were these images for final advertising, or are these for comps for presentation purposes?
For final advertising, that went out to the public. But you raised an important point. In addition to the assets for the final public-facing advertising, AI is also useful for finding, like, generating images for comps that are used in internal decks and all that. Like, that is actually the second use case of AI that we've recently discovered, where, typically when we come up with a lot of ideas to put into a deck, and we have no idea how many of those are going to be approved, and there's every possibility most of them will just be killed instantly, we don't put in much effort to visually design them, because it's not worth it. It's not worth spending days to design something which might be rejected at an ideal level. But now with generative AI, we're able to comp up almost every idea we think of. We're able to do that without spending a whole lot of time on it. We're able to come up with really, like, advanced looking comps of an idea in just 15 minutes. I think so. That is also another valuable use case. The first thing I talked about was how it helps us get the assets needed for public facing advertising. And then second thing is all the internal comps. And this whole thing is only, so far, I've only talked about the visual side of things. There are like others I know. I mean, I personally don't do it because I started out as a copywriter, so I can do my own writing, and I kind of trust my own writing more than AI writing. But there are those who started out as art directors or started out as strategists. I find that many of them use generative AI for the verbal side of things as well, and even to help them with ideation. And quite often, when we ask, say, ChatGPT or Claude or any of those to generate either images or text, it generates in raw form. We have to refine it, but then it gives us a good start.
Yeah. I think of generative AI for me as my sidekick. I like you. I trust my own writing skills, but I can write a block of copy. I'll drop it into ChatGPT. Tell ChatGPT, I want you to write this as if you are a journalist, a marketing person, or an advertising person, and I want to see what it can generate. And if I can steal a line or a phrase, I will. It's just to help me.
Or you can get a prompt and you ask it for something and it might get you 80%. It's like it's like sculpting a statue, right? But 80% of the rock's already been chiseled away, and now you're just fine tuning it and say, yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm going to change that. But you saved 50% of the time or more, because you got 80% of the content within a few seconds. But of course, it's up to the expertise of the person who's handling the AI to really make sure that what comes out is a quality product.
Yeah, the danger is a rank amateur using it without any knowledge of whether what comes out is valuable, and just accepts it as gospel. That's the danger. So, Vasanth, do you? I want to give you this opportunity, which, I mean, I can do a screen share with you. Do you have any work that you'd like to show off to our viewers?
Yep. In fact, let's do that. That'll be good. Yeah. So this is our agency website, The Sunny Side, and so these are some of the work we've done. We've done work for P&G, as you can see, Sustain, which is a Novartis brand, and a couple of SMEs and startups, as well as other P&G stuff. maybe the one piece of work I'd like to show you is the Gillette ad we did. And it was for the Singapore market, and it had like Singapore's first and so far only Olympic champion, Joseph Schooling, who was a swimmer who beat Michael Phelps in 2016 at the Rio Olympics.
Wow, no small feat.
Yeah. And we're also happy that we were able to work with him. So this is 1.5 minute film we did with him. So let me just play that.
Shaving is not the only thing Dad taught me. He taught me to better myself with every stroke.
And look at the times.
He taught me that the world is my competition.
You will respect your competitors, but you will never fear them.
Yes.
Dad, I got gold!
Well done, son. Come on, sit there. Did you congratulate the others?
But most importantly, he taught me to always be a gentleman. That there's more to life than individual glory.
Hi kids, how are you?
It's by bringing out the best in others that we truly become our best. Gillette.
We wanted to give a little twist where you think he is just preparing for his next competition in a typical athletic ad, almost like a Nike ad kind of a way. But in the end, it turns out he's actually like training a bunch of kids. And it's the line at the end, it's by bringing out the best in others that we truly become our best. So that is something we wanted to have to encapsulate the whole thing.
Of course, playing off of the tagline that they had, long-running tagline of the best a man can get.
Yeah. A little bit of equity in that line.
Yep. And we wanted to have this thing where, okay, it's great to be a champion, it's great to win at the Olympics, but it's by passing it on, like that you leave a legacy, and that's when you reach a higher level than even by winning the Olympics. So that's what we wanted to say. And I'll show you a
Very
completely
nice.
different piece of work if there is time. There's an app we built for Sistine, which is a dry eye, like eye drop brand. And how the app works is it went in store, and in store, when somebody walks in front of the iPad hosting the app, it calls out to you to take a little dry eye test where it gives you a bunch of images to look at, and it measures your blinks, how frequently you're blinking. And if you're blinking more, you're deemed to have like a higher risk of dry eyes. And right next to it, you have the products, so you can pick it up whenever you find that you may have dry eyes, you have the product right next to it that you can pick up. And when the client first came to us, we were meant to just design it. But we said, hey, we can find developers. We have developers in our network who can develop it as well. So in the end, we designed, we developed, and we helped with the in-store installation. So we were able to do it end to end. But you can always check out our site, thesunnyside.sg. So.
Well, that was great. You know, let me kind of wrap things up by asking you this. You came to New York. I don't know if you were a young man, but you came to New York fairly early in your career, and went back to Singapore with, some valuable lessons under your belt.
Yep.
And I know that a lot of advertising professionals like to go, to Europe, South America, and out to Singapore and other places in Asia to cut their teeth as well. What advice would you give to, let's say, some young people? One of the things that Henry and I do is we talk to young people who are either still in an advertising program or recently graduated and they're getting their career started. Should they consider coming out to your fair city and trying their hand at some of the creative work? And what would your advice be to to these young people about coming to Singapore or another city out there?
First of all, I think it's definitely it's important to spend some time on the other side of the world early in your career. Like I was in New York in my 20s, and I'm glad I did it in my 20s and not in my 30s, because early on, like 20s are the time we are at your most impressionable as far as your career is concerned, and I think having that experience early on is important. And because I'm from Asia, the experience of New York was completely new to me. For somebody from North America or South America or Europe, Asia can have a similar kind of newness. And I think definitely the same way it was enriching for me to work in New York in my 20s, I think it would be enriching for somebody from North America to work in Asia as early as possible in their careers. And Singapore is often described as Asia for beginners, where it's obviously Asia, but it doesn't have the chaos you'll find in India, for example, or in the Philippines, for example. And it's like a disciplined, clean, low crime Asian city. So I would say it's a good start to your Asian experience, and I think it's a good thing to live in Singapore and then travel to the rest of Asia. And but I think my advice to anybody coming to Singapore or moving to Singapore would be, don't just stay in Singapore, experience the rest of Asia. And you'll find that Asia is so diverse, and you'll find that your experience in Thailand will be very different from your experience in India, which will be very different from your experience in China, and so on. And when you're in Singapore, you'll find yourself doing work for all these markets, because Singapore itself is quite small, and there isn't really much work we can do just for Singapore. Though the Gillette ad I showed you is for Singapore, most of the work we've done have been for regional or sometimes even like global markets. So I would say experience Asia, not just a protected form of Asia that you find in Singapore.
Wow, I don't know about you, Henry, but if I had it to do over again, Asia would have been a nice opportunity. I didn't get that chance. We talked to Neil Ford a few months ago, and I think he started out, was it in Singapore, if I recall?
I don't remember.
But I think he felt like he was a fish out of water, but he had a great experience and never regretted it. So, and in any event, Vasanth Seshadri from Sunnyside, founder and creative director in Singapore. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a great conversation. We appreciate it. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
He's Howard Ibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.